Commander Juwu Park stood at the bridge of the Earth Naval Alliance ship Indomitable *, his eyes fixed on the blue-green planet growing larger on the main screen. His hands were clasped behind his back, but his knuckles had turned white from squeezing too hard. This was humanity's first meeting with the Varrock species, and everything had to go perfectly. "Sir, we're entering Teguk's orbit now," said Lieutenant Commander Hannah Lee. She was small, barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, but her presence filled the bridge. As the ship's tactical officer, she had studied everything they knew about the Varrocks. "Their defense systems are tracking us, but they haven't activated weapons." Juwu nodded. "Good. Let's keep it that way." A young officer turned from his station. "Commander, we're receiving a message from the surface." On screen, Juwu ordered. The image of a blue-skinned alien appeared. Even sitting down, it was clear the creature was enormous. Her head nearly touched the top of the screen, and her shoulders were twice as wide as any human's. "Earth vessel," the alien spoke in a deep voice that seemed to vibrate through the ship's speakers. "I am Warrior General Nera of the Varrock Imperium. You will land your shuttle at the coordinates we are sending. Bring no more than 5 of your kind. Be prepared to explain why tiny creatures like you dare enter Varrock space." The screen went black before Juwu could answer. Hannah moved to stand beside him. "That went well," she said quietly. Juwu almost smiled. "I've read the reports, Hannah. The Varrocks respect strength and size. They think shorter species are weak by nature. Then we'll have to change their minds." Hannah's voice was firm. "Intel says they've crushed 3 other species who tried to make contact. All were smaller than them." Juwu faced his crew. "Prepare the shuttle. Lieutenant Commander Lee, you're with me. We'll also take Security Chief Gowan, Science Officer Tai, and Communications Specialist Minji." 3 hours later, their shuttle broke through Teguk's cloud cover. Below them stretched a vast city of towering stone buildings. Each structure seemed built for giants, with doors twice the height of Earth standards. "They're making a point," muttered Dowan, checking his sidearm one last time. The shuttle landed in an open plaza surrounded by what looked like Varrock soldiers. Each stood at least 8 feet tall, carrying staffs that glowed at the tips. "Remember," Juwu said to his team as the shuttle door opened, "show no fear. That's what they'll be looking for." The heat hit them first as they stepped onto Teguk soil. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, making each step feel heavy. At the far end of the plaza stood a group of Varrocks in ornate armor. One stepped forward, and Juwu recognized Warrior General Nera from the transmission. She was even more imposing in person, nearly 8.5 feet of blue-skinned warrior, covered in battle scars and decorated with metal bands that wrapped around her massive arms. Her eyes, 3 of them, the third in the center of her forehead, looked down at the humans with clear disgust. "So," Nara's voice boomed across the plaza, "the rumors were true. You humans are barely taller than our children." She circled the group, stopping in front of Hannah, who was the shortest. This one could be stepped on by accident. Some of the Varrock soldiers laughed. Juwu stepped forward. "Warrior General Nara, I am Commander Juwu Park of the Earth Naval Alliance. We come in peace, seeking friendship between our worlds." Nara's top lip curled back, showing teeth that looked designed for tearing meat. "Friendship? What use would the mighty Varrock Imperium have for friendship with creatures who must look up to speak to us? Your kind would serve better as pets, perhaps." The Varrock soldiers laughed louder this time. Hannah's hand twitched near her sidearm, but Juwu gave her a warning glance. "We have much to offer each other," Juwu continued calmly. "Technology, resources, knowledge." "Knowledge." Nera leaned down until her face was inches from Juwu's. Her breath smelled like metal. "What could we possibly learn from you?" "Perhaps," Juwu said, meeting her 3-eyed gaze without flinching, "that size isn't everything." The first meeting with the Varrocks ended badly. Commander Juwu Park and his team were escorted back to their shuttle with loud laughs following them. Once inside, Security Chief Dowan punched the wall. "This is pointless," he said. "They won't respect us no matter what we say." Hana sat quietly, her face calm but her eyes burning. "They'd judge without knowing us, just like others have done to me my whole life because of my size." Back on the Indomitable Asterisk, the team met to discuss their options. Science Officer Ta suggested they leave Varrock space. "The reports were right," she said. "They only respect physical power. We should find friendlier species." Chu was about to respond when communications specialist Minji looked up from her screen. "Commander, we're receiving a message from the surface." The large face of Warrior General Nera filled the screen once again. This time, she wore a smile that showed too many teeth. "Commander Park," she said, "the High Council has discussed your request for friendship." She said the word like it tasted bad. "We have decided to give you a chance to prove your worth." Juwu leaned forward. "We're listening." 3 trials, Nara continued. "If your humans pass them, we will consider talks with Earth. If you fail, you leave our space forever." Her 3 eyes blinked one after another. "Do you accept?" Before Juwu could speak, Hana stepped forward. "What kind of trials?" Nara's eyes narrowed when she saw who had spoken. "The tiny female speaks for your ship now, Commander." "Lieutenant Commander Lee is my second in command," Juwu said firmly. "Answer her question." Nara seemed surprised but continued. "Trials of strength, endurance, and combat. The 3 values all worthy species must possess." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew these were trials designed for the Varrock's physical advantages. "We accept," said Juwu. The crew looked at him in shock. Nara's smile grew wider. "Very well. 1 human champion must complete all 3 trials. Come to the surface at dawn tomorrow." The screen went dark. "Sir," Dowan said immediately, "this is suicide. They're twice our size with 3 times our strength." Juwu turned to face his crew. "If we leave now, the Varrocks will tell every species they meet that humans are cowards. We can't let that happen." "I'll do it," Hana said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "With respect, Lieutenant Commander," said Dowan, "you're the smallest among us." Hana stood up straight, her eyes steady. "Exactly. When I win, it will prove that size truly doesn't matter." Juwu studied her face. He had known Hana for 5 years. She had graduated top of her class at the academy despite being constantly underestimated. If anyone could find a way to beat the Varrocks at their own game, it would be her. "All right." He nodded. "Hana will be our champion." The next morning, the shuttle landed again in the Varrock capital. This time, a large crowd had gathered. Tall blue aliens lined the streets, pointing and laughing as the humans walked by. They were led to a massive stone arena. In the center stood Warrior General Nara, now dressed in full battle armor that made her look even larger. When she saw Hana step forward as the human champion, she threw back her head and laughed. The sound echoed through the arena, and the crowd joined in. "This," Nara pointed at Hana, "this is your champion. I could hold her in one hand." Hana didn't react. She simply walked to the center of the arena and looked up at the warrior general. "Explain the first trial," she said, her voice clear and strong despite the jeers from the crowd. Nara stopped laughing and leaned down. "The trial of strength. See those stone blocks?" She pointed to massive rectangular stones at the far end of the arena. "You must move your block across the line before my warrior moves his." A Varrock male stepped forward. He was even taller than Nara, with muscles that bulged under his blue skin. Hana looked at the stone blocks. Each was at least twice her height and must have weighed tons. There was no way any human could move one by pure strength. "The trial begins when the horn sounds," said Nara, smirking. "Don't worry, little human. We have excellent doctors to treat your broken bones." Hana turned to Juwu. "Commander, may I have my toolkit?" He handed her a small pouch from his belt. Nara laughed again. "Tools. This is a test of strength, not building skills. Hannah looked the giant alien in her 3 eyes. You never said how we had to move the blocks, only that they must cross the line. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Nera's face. A deep horn blast echoed through the arena. The trial of strength had begun. The Varrock warrior, who Nara called Tak, immediately put his massive hands against his stone block and began to push. His muscles bulged as he dug his feet into the ground. The huge stone began to move slowly. The crowd cheered for Tak. Many didn't even bother to watch Hannah. They were sure the tiny human would fail. But Hannah wasn't trying to push her block. Instead, she knelt beside it, quickly pulling items from her toolkit. Commander Juwu watched with interest. He trusted Hannah's clever mind more than any warrior's strength. "What is the small one doing?" someone in the crowd asked. Soon, more eyes turned to watch Hannah. From her toolkit, Hannah took out metal rods that locked together and a set of strong cables. She worked fast, her hands sure and steady. She built a frame against the stone block, then created a simple pulley system using parts from her belt. Nera watched with narrowed eyes. "Tricks," she said loudly. "The human uses tricks because she has no strength." Hannah ignored the words. She finished her device, then positioned herself at the end of the cable. She pulled hard. The pulley system multiplied her force, and the stone block began to move. Across the arena, Tak was making progress. His block was already a quarter of the way to the line. Sweat covered his blue skin, but he pushed steadily. Hannah's block moved more slowly at first. The crowd laughed and pointed. But soon, her pulley system hit its stride. As she pulled rhythmically on the cable, her block picked up speed. Tak noticed and pushed harder. But he was tiring, while Hannah's device allowed her to maintain a steady pace. The crowd grew quieter as they watched. No one was laughing now. Halfway across the arena, Tak's block slowed down. The Varrock warrior was breathing hard, his muscles shaking with effort. He glanced over his shoulder and saw Hannah's block gaining on his. "Impossible," he grunted, pushing with renewed force. Hannah didn't waste energy on words. She kept pulling steadily on her cable, adjusting her device when needed. Her face showed deep concentration. 3/4 of the way to the line, the blocks were even. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Nera stood perfectly still, her 3 eyes fixed on the human. Tak roared with effort, pushing his block with everything he had. But his earlier pace had tired him. His movements became jerky and uneven. Hannah's block moved with steady precision. Inch by inch, it pulled ahead of Tak's. When her block crossed the line first, the arena remained silent for several heartbeats. Then a low murmur spread through the crowd. Hannah stood up straight, wiping sweat from her forehead. She looked at Tak, who had fallen to his knees in exhaustion, and walked over to him. "Good effort," she said, offering a small water container from her belt. The Varrock warrior looked at her in confusion, then took the water. Nera stomped forward, her face dark with anger. "This is not a victory of strength. This human used tricks to win." Commander Juwu stepped forward. "Your challenge was to move the block across the line. You didn't say how." In Varrock tradition, a deep voice said from the side of the arena, "A victory is a victory, no matter the method." Everyone turned to see an older Varrock with silver bands on his arms. The crowd bowed their heads slightly as he approached. "High Elder Koru," Nera said, her voice lower now. "This was meant to test strength." "And it did," the elder replied. "Strength of mind is still strength." He looked at Hannah with all 3 of his eyes. The human passes the first trial. Hannah bowed respectfully to the elder. Nera's face showed a mix of anger and surprise. "Very well," she said stiffly. "But the next trial cannot be won with little metal toys. The trial of endurance begins at dawn tomorrow in the Burning Flats." She leaned down close to Hannah's face. "No human has ever survived a day in that desert. Your clever tricks won't save you from the sun and heat." Hannah met her gaze without flinching. I'll be ready." As the humans walked back to their shuttle, the Verocs in the crowd watched them with new eyes. Some still looked doubtful, but others seemed curious. The tiny human had surprised them all. "That was brilliant," Ju said quietly to Hana as they walked. "One down, 2 to go," she replied. "But she's right about the desert. I'll need help preparing." Ju nodded. "The whole ship will help. We're going to show these giants what humans are made of." Dawn on Taeguk brought 3 suns rising over the horizon. Their combined light turned the sky a deep purple. The human team stood at the edge of the burning flats, a vast desert that stretched as far as they could see. The air was already hot, and it was only getting hotter. Warrior General Nera arrived with a group of Verocs. With her was a female warrior named Loka, who would face Hana in this trial. "The rules are simple," Nera announced. "Cross 50 miles of desert to reach the Blue Oasis." She pointed to a spot on a map. "Each contestant gets 1 water container and a survival pack." She held up a small bag. "Inside you will find a knife, fire starter, and emergency flare. Nothing else is allowed." Hana stepped forward to take her pack. Next to her, Loka looked strong and confident. The Veroc's thick blue skin was designed to protect against harsh sunlight. Verocs also needed less water than humans. Commander Ju gave Hana a concerned look. "Remember your training," he said quietly. Hana nodded. All night, the ship's crew had helped her prepare. Science Officer Tai had studied Taeguk's desert conditions. Communications specialist Minji had translated old Veroc maps of the region. "Begin," Nera shouted. Loka immediately started running into the desert. Hana watched her go, then turned to Ju. "See you at the oasis," she said with a small smile. Then she began walking at a steady pace. The Verocs laughed. "She walks while Loka runs," one shouted. "The human will die before reaching halfway." Nera watched with narrowed eyes. "The small one has a plan," she said quietly. By midday, the desert had become an oven. The 3 suns burned overhead, making the sand hot enough to burn skin on contact. Loka was far ahead, her form a distant dot on the horizon. Hana had covered her head and face with fabric torn from her uniform. She walked steadily, conserving energy. When the heat became unbearable, she stopped and dug into the sand. 3 feet down, the sand was cooler. Hana lay in this shallow pit, resting until the worst heat passed. She sipped water sparingly from her container. As the suns began to set, Hana started moving again. The Verocs tracking the contestants were surprised. Humans were not known to see well in darkness, yet Hana walked confidently through the growing night. What they didn't know was that she had memorized the star patterns above Taeguk. Using them as guides, she navigated without needing to see the ground clearly. Through the night she walked, stopping only for short rests. Her water was half gone, but she had covered more than 20 miles. As morning approached, she found something surprising: small desert plants with thick leaves. Using her knife, she cut one open to find moisture inside. She collected this liquid carefully, adding it to her water supply. By the second day's midday heat, Hana had learned the desert's patterns. Where certain birds flew, water might be found underground. Where small creatures made homes, edible roots often grew. Meanwhile, Loka had pushed too hard in the heat. The Veroc's natural confidence had led her to underestimate the desert. She had run too fast, using too much water too quickly. When Hana spotted a shape on the ground ahead, she quickened her pace. It was Loka, collapsed from heat exhaustion. The Veroc warrior lay still, her skin a paler blue than normal. Hana knelt beside her. Loka's water container was empty. Her breathing was shallow. From far away, Veroc observers watched through vision devices. They expected the human to continue past her fallen opponent. That's what any Veroc would do. Instead, they saw Hana lift Loka's head and give her water. She created another sand pit and moved the Veroc into its cooler depth. Then she placed her emergency flare beside Loka. "What is she doing?" One Varrock observer asked. She is ensuring Loka will be found and saved. Another replied, confusion in his voice. But this will slow her down. She might lose the trial. Nara watched silently, her three eyes blinking slowly. After making sure Loka was stable, Hana continued toward the oasis. The flare would guide rescue teams to the fallen Varrock. Hours later, as the third sunset approached, Hana spotted a line of green against the horizon. The blue oasis was close. Her legs ached, and her lips were cracked from heat, but she kept moving forward. When she finally reached the oasis, she found no one had arrived before her. Despite helping Loka, she had won the second trial. Word of Hana's victory in the desert spread quickly through the Varrock city. Even more surprising to the aliens was how she had helped Loka. The Varrock warrior had been rescued thanks to Hana's flare and was now recovering. Why did you help your opponent? Nara demanded when Hana returned from the oasis. She would have left you to die. Hana looked up at the towering warrior general. That's not how humans do things. Nara stared at her with all three eyes. Your ways are strange. Then she straightened up. The final trial begins tomorrow at midday. The trial of combat. Commander Juwu stepped forward. I will take this trial in Lieutenant Commander Lee's place. Nara laughed. Too late, Commander. Your champion must complete all three trials. Those are our rules. That night on the Indomitable Asterisk, the mood was tense. Hana sat in the ship's gym, stretching her muscles. The desert trial had left her tired, but there was no time to rest. You don't have to do this, Juwu said, watching her train. We can still leave. Hana shook her head. We've come too far. She stood up. Who will I fight? Security Chief Dowan looked at his datapad. They're saying it's a warrior named Maru. He's never lost a combat trial. Great, Hana said with a small smile. Then he's due for a loss. The combat arena was packed with Varrocks the next day. Their blue faces showed excitement. The tiny human had surprised them twice, but surely she would fail against Maru. The Varrock warrior entered the arena to loud cheers. He stood 9 feet tall, his muscles even larger than Tax. In his hands he held a long metal staff with sharp points at both ends. Choose your weapon, Nara said to Hana, pointing to a wall of Varrock weapons. Each was nearly as tall as Hana herself. Hana walked to the wall and selected a short blade, similar to a knife but with a curved edge. The crowd laughed at her choice. Begin, Nara shouted. Maru didn't wait. He charged forward, swinging his staff in a wide arc. Hana ducked under it and rolled away. The Varrock's weapon hit the ground where she had been standing, leaving a deep mark in the stone. Stand still, tiny one. Maru growled, attacking again. Hana didn't try to block his strikes. His strength would break her arms if she did. Instead, she focused on speed, staying just out of his reach. The crowd grew louder, calling for Maru to finish her quickly. But as the minutes passed, something changed. Maru's attacks became slower. His breathing grew heavier. She's tiring him out, Commander Juwu said quietly from the sidelines. Hana continued her strategy, moving in circles around the arena. Whenever Maru swung his heavy staff, she wasn't there. The Varrock was used to quick victories. No opponent had ever lasted this long against him. Fight me properly, Maru shouted in frustration, his staff hitting empty air again. I am, Hana replied calmly, ducking another swing. 10 minutes became 20. Maru's movements grew sluggish. Sweat poured down his blue skin. The crowd had grown quieter, watching with increasing interest. Finally, Hana sought her chance. Maru swung his staff in a wide arc, putting too much force behind it. When it missed, he stumbled forward off balance. Hana moved in quickly. She slid between his legs and came up behind him. Before he could turn, she jumped on his back, climbing up to his shoulders. Her small size now worked to her advantage. Her knife pressed against his throat. Yield, she said firmly. The arena went completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Maru stood frozen, the tiny human on his back holding a blade to his throat. Then, slowly, he lowered his staff. "I yield," he said, his deep voice echoing through the silent arena. Hannah removed her blade and climbed down. She stood before the massive warrior and bowed respectfully. The silence broke. A low murmur spread through the crowd, growing louder. It wasn't cheering, but it wasn't anger either. It was confusion, surprise, and something new: respect. Nera walked to the center of the arena, her face unreadable. "The human has passed all 3 trials," she announced. "According to our laws, we must now consider her people worthy of talks." She looked down at Hannah. "How did you defeat a warrior twice your size?" Hannah sheathed her small blade. "Size isn't everything, Warrior General. Humans learned long ago that battles aren't always won by the strongest. Sometimes they're won by the smartest." For the first time, Nera didn't have a dismissive reply. The next day, the humans were invited to the Varrock High Council chamber. It was a huge room with a ceiling so high that humans had to crane their necks to see it. Giant stone chairs formed a circle in the center. The Varrock Council members sat looking down at the human visitors. Hannah stood beside Commander Juwu, still sore from the combat trial. She felt tiny in this room built for giants, but she stood tall. "The human called Hannah has completed our 3 trials," announced High Elder Koru. "This has never happened before. We must now talk with these humans about possible friendship between our worlds." Some council members nodded. Others looked unhappy. Warrior General Nera sat with her arms crossed, her 3 eyes watching Hannah closely. "Thank you, High Elder," Commander Juwu said. "Earth looks forward to peaceful relations with the Varrock Imperium." As the meeting continued, communications specialist Minji's small device beeped softly. She looked at it, then whispered something to Juwu. His face grew serious. "High Elder," Juwu said, interrupting a Varrock who was speaking, "I must share important information. Our ship has detected strange signals at the edge of your star system." The council members looked annoyed at the interruption. "What kind of signals?" Nara asked, her voice suspicious. "We believe it's a fleet of ships," Juwu said. "They're using hidden travel methods, but our sensors detected them. They appear to be Krell vessels." The room went silent. Even Juwu's team looked surprised. They had never heard of the Krell before. "Impossible," one council member said. "The Krell would not dare enter our space." "Who are the Krell?" Hannah asked quietly. High Elder Koru's face had darkened. "Enemies of the Varrock. They are a species of hunters who take what they want and destroy what they cannot take. If they are truly coming," Nera said, standing up, "we must prepare for battle." Juwu nodded to Minji, who projected a star map from her device. It showed several red dots moving toward Taeguk. "Based on their speed and direction, they will reach Taeguk in less than 1 day," Juwu said. The council erupted in loud voices. Some demanded immediate action. Others claimed the humans were lying to trick them. "Why would we lie?" Hannah asked, her voice cutting through the noise. "What would we gain?" "Perhaps to make us think you saved us," Nera replied. "To force our gratitude." Juwu stepped forward. "We don't need tricks to earn your respect. We've already done that through the trials. But if you ignore this warning, your people will suffer." Nera's eyes narrowed. How convenient that these enemies appeared just as we begin talks with humans. "Check your own sensors," Juwu suggested. "You'll see we're telling the truth." One of the Varrock technicians left the room. A tense silence followed. Minutes later, the technician returned, his blue face pale. "The human speaks truth," he said. "Our long-range sensors now detect the Krell fleet. They've dropped their hiding shields. 15 warships heading directly for Taeguk." The council room exploded with activity. Orders were shouted. Guards ran to carry messages. The peaceful meeting had turned into war preparations in moments. High Elder Koru turned to Juwu. "How did your small ship detect them when our sensors did not?" "Earth has faced sneaky enemies before," Juwu explained. "We developed better sensors because we had to." Nera approached the humans. Her face was still suspicious, but something had changed in her eyes. "Your ship is too small to fight the Krell. You should leave now while you can." "We're not going anywhere," Ju said firmly. "What can 5 humans do against a Krell fleet?" Nera asked. Hana stepped forward. "The same thing we did in your trials. Find a way to win even when the odds look impossible." For a moment, Nera looked like she might argue. Instead, she nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this, if this is some human trick, you will not leave Tagak alive." As they left the council chamber, Hana looked at Ju. "Do we have a plan?" "Not yet," he replied quietly. "But the Krell ships are real, and they're coming. We need to help these people whether they trust us or not." Outside, the 3 suns of Tagak were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and red. By the time they rose again, war would come to this world. Morning never came. Instead, the sky lit up with fire. The Krell ships arrived earlier than expected. Their dark vessels dropped from space like giant metal spiders, their weapons already firing. The first blast hit the Varrock defense tower, destroying it instantly. The second hit the city's power center, plunging everything into darkness. Panic spread through the streets as blue-skinned giants ran for shelter. Commander Ju and his team were in the command center with Nera when the attack began. The room shook with each blast. "They targeted our defenses first," Nera said, her voice tight with anger. "They knew exactly where to hit us." "They've been watching," Ju said, looking at the damage reports. "Probably since before we arrived." Hana studied the display showing the Krell ships. Their attack pattern is efficient. They'd done this before. A massive explosion rocked the building. Part of the ceiling fell, nearly crushing a Varrock technician. "Our main defense grid is down," someone shouted. "We cannot shoot them from the ground anymore." Nera turned to her warriors. "Prepare all ground forces. We will fight them when they land." "That won't be enough," Ju said. "Your city will be destroyed before they even set foot on the ground." "What would you suggest, human?" Nera asked, her voice cold but desperate. "Let us help," Ju said. "The Indomitable Asterisk has shields that can protect key buildings. If we can keep your government center and backup power stations safe, you'll have time to organize a defense." Nera looked doubtful. "Your tiny ship has such power." "Our shields are designed with advanced technology," Hana explained. "They can cover targeted areas with protective fields." Another explosion shook the room, closer this time. Dust fell from the ceiling. "We have no choice," the High Elder said from the doorway. He had come to the command center despite the danger. "Accept their help, Warrior General." Nera nodded stiffly. "Very well. What do you need from us?" "Coordinates of your most important buildings," Ju said, "and someone to help guide our ship into position." "I will go," Nera said, surprising everyone. "I know every part of this city." Minutes later, they were rushing toward the landing pad where the human shuttle waited. The streets were chaos. Frightened Varrocks ran past them. Buildings burned. The air filled with smoke and screams. A Krell ship passed overhead, its weapons hitting a temple nearby. The stone structure collapsed in flames. "Keep moving," Nera shouted, pushing ahead of the humans with her long strides. They reached the shuttle just as another blast hit nearby, throwing them all to the ground. Hana helped Ju to his feet. His arm was bleeding. "Can you fly?" she asked. He nodded, climbing into the pilot's seat. The rest of the team and Nera squeezed into the small shuttle. "This was built for humans," Nera complained, her head touching the ceiling. "Sorry, we didn't expect to carry giants," Security Chief Dowan said, helping her sit. The shuttle lifted off, dodging debris and weapons fire as it rose toward the Indomitable Asterisk. Through the window, they could see more Krell ships entering the atmosphere. At least 20 now, more than their first estimate. "There are too many," Nera said, her voice hollow. "We've faced worse odds." Hana told her, though she wasn't sure if that was true. When they reached the indomitable asterisk, Nera looked around in surprise. The human ship seemed even smaller inside than it looked from outside. "This is your mighty vessel?" she asked. "Size isn't everything," Ju reminded her with a small smile. "You should know that by now." He quickly gave orders to his crew. The ship hummed with activity as they prepared the shield systems. "We can cover 3 locations at most," Science Officer Tay reported. "The power will drain quickly. Then we protect the command center, the backup power station, and the civilian shelter," Ju decided. Nera looked at him. "You would use your shields for civilians rather than weapon systems." "People come first," Ju said simply. The indomitable asterisk moved into position above the city. Below, they could see Krell landing craft touching down in the main plaza. The invaders were tall, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and glowing yellow eyes. "Shields activating now," Hannah announced from her station. Blue energy fields appeared over the 3 selected buildings just as the Krell fired at them. The blasts hit the shields and scattered harmlessly. For the first time since they had met her, Warrior General Nera looked at the humans with something close to respect. The indomitable's asterisk shields held against the Krell attacks, but alarms began to sound throughout the ship. "Shield power at 60% and dropping," reported Science Officer Ta. "We can maintain protection for maybe 2 hours." Commander Ju looked at the tactical display. More Krell ships were landing. Soon the city would be overrun. "We need your main fleet," he said to Nera. "How far away are they?" 3 hours at their fastest speed," she replied. "They were on training exercises in the outer system." Hannah studied the battle map. "We don't have 3 hours." She pointed to a spot on the display. "The Krell are setting up a large weapon here. If they finish it, they can destroy this whole area." Nera's 3 eyes narrowed. "Then we must stop them." "How?" asked Security Chief Gowan. "We're keeping the shields up. We can't fight them directly." "I have an idea," Hannah said. Everyone turned to look at her. "The Krell ships are linked by a command system. If we can disrupt it, we might confuse them long enough for reinforcements to arrive." "How do you know this?" Nara asked suspiciously. "We analyzed their communication patterns," Hannah explained. "All their ships move too perfectly together. They must share a central command system." Chu nodded. "If we can create a disruption signal, we might throw them into chaos." "I can build a device to do that," said Hannah. "But someone needs to place it near their main landing ship." The room went quiet. Placing such a device would mean going right into the center of the Krell forces. "I will do it," Nera said suddenly. "I know the city best." "You'll need help," Hannah replied. "I have to go too. Only I know how to activate the device correctly." Ju looked worried. "It's too dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Hannah said firmly. "If the Krell finish their weapon, everyone dies." Within 30 minutes, Hannah had built a small device using parts from the Indomitable's communication systems. It was designed to send out signals that would confuse the Krell command network. "It must be placed within 100 meters of their main ship," she explained to Nera as they prepared to leave. "Once activated, we'll have 5 minutes to get away before it starts working." They took the shuttle back down to the surface, landing in a hidden spot behind the command center. The city was now a battlefield. Krell soldiers moved through the streets while Varrock warriors fought them. Buildings burned all around them. "This way," Nera said, leading Hannah through narrow side streets. Even with the danger, the warrior general had to slow her pace for the smaller human. They reached a viewpoint overlooking the main plaza. The largest Krell ship sat in the center, with smaller ones around it. Krell soldiers guarded every approach. "There are too many," Nara whispered. "We cannot get close enough." Hannah looked around and spotted a drainage tunnel. "What about going under them?" The tunnel was barely big enough for Nara to crawl through. Her large body scraped against the sides, while Hannah moved more easily ahead of her. The tunnel was dark and smelled terrible, but it led them right under the plaza. "Here," Hannah said, stopping at a grate. Above them, they could see the underside of the Krell ship. "This is close enough." She carefully set up the device and activated it. A small light began blinking. "We have 5 minutes," she said. Just as they turned to leave, a loud crack came from above. The grate broke open, and a Krell soldier looked down at them with glowing yellow eyes. It screeched and reached for them with its 4 arms. Nera pushed Hannah behind her and faced the Krell. The alien was nearly as tall as she was but had more limbs. It jumped down into the tunnel, blocking their escape. "Run," Nera shouted to Hannah. "Complete the mission." But Hannah didn't run. Instead, she picked up a broken pipe and struck at the Krell's legs. It wasn't a strong blow, but it distracted the creature long enough for Nera to attack. The tunnel was too narrow for proper fighting. Nera couldn't use her full strength in the tight space. The Krell's extra arms gave it an advantage. It struck Nera hard, sending her crashing against the wall. Then it turned toward Hannah. The human woman stood her ground, small but determined. As the Krell reached for her, she ducked between its legs and jabbed her pipe into a joint in its armor. The creature screeched in pain. Nara recovered and grabbed it from behind, using her massive strength to crush its neck. "We must hurry," she said, breathing hard. "Others will come." Together, they escaped through the tunnel just as more Krell soldiers arrived. They ran through the burning city, trying to reach safe distance before the device activated. Hannah and Nera had almost reached the command center when the device activated. Suddenly, all around them, the Krell soldiers stopped moving. Some dropped their weapons. Others began walking in circles or bumping into walls. "It's working," Hannah said, breathing hard from running. "The disruption signal is confusing their commands." Nera watched in amazement as the fearsome invaders became confused and disorganized. "Your tiny device did this." "Technology doesn't care about size," Hannah replied with a smile. They hurried into the command center where Commander Juwu and the Varrock leaders were monitoring the battle. "The Krell ships are losing formation," reported a Varrock technician. "Their attack pattern has collapsed." On the screens, they could see Krell soldiers wandering aimlessly, while Varrock warriors quickly moved in to capture them. The larger ships tried to take off but crashed into each other. It was chaos. "This is our chance," said Nera. "We must push them back before they recover." The High Elder nodded. "All warriors, advance." For the next hour, the Varrocks regained control of their city section by section. The Indomitable Asterisk continued to shield key buildings, while also using its sensors to locate hidden Krell soldiers. Then the ship's alarms sounded again. "Shield power critical," called Science Officer Tai over the communication link. "We have to shut down one of the shield areas or risk losing them all." Before Juwu could respond, a new signal appeared on their screens. "Varrock fleet approaching," shouted a technician. "They will arrive in 20 minutes. "We just need to hold on a little longer," Juwu said. "Keep all shields up." But the Krell had begun to recover from the disruption. Their main ship was powering up its largest weapon, aiming directly at the command center where the human and Varrock leaders were gathered. "They're going to fire," Hannah warned. "Everyone must evacuate now." As people began rushing from the room, the ceiling suddenly collapsed. A Krell commander, larger than the others with 6 arms instead of 4, dropped into the center of the room. It carried a weapon that glowed with energy. "The humans die first," it hissed in broken Varrock language. It aimed its weapon at Juwu. Nera moved without hesitation, placing herself between the Krell and the humans. But she wasn't fast enough. Hannah pushed Juwu aside and took the blast meant for him. It struck her in the shoulder, sending her crashing to the floor. "Hannah!" Juwu shouted, rushing to her side. The Krell commander prepared to fire again, but Nera was on it now, her rage giving her even more strength than usual. She grabbed the creature's arms and ripped the weapon away. With one powerful move, she snapped the Krell's neck. As Nera turned back, She saw Juwu cradling the injured Hana. Despite her wound, the small human was still giving orders. "The shield on the power station," Hana said weakly. "Drop it and focus on the command center and civilian shelter." "But the station will be destroyed," Juwu argued. "Better than losing everything," she replied. "Do it now." Juwu gave the order, and the indomitable asterisk redirected its power to strengthen the remaining shields. Moments later, the Krell weapon fired, destroying the power station, but leaving the protected areas untouched. Then the sky lit up again, this time with the arrival of the Varrock fleet. Their massive ships descended upon the Krell, firing powerful weapons that destroyed the enemy vessels one by one. The battle turned quickly after that. 2 days later, when the fighting was over and the last Krell ships had been destroyed or driven away, a ceremony was held in the Great Hall of the Varrock High Council. Hana stood with her arm in a healing wrap, alongside Commander Juwu and the rest of the human team. Across from them stood Warrior General Nera and the Varrock leaders. High Elder Koru spoke first. "Today we honor the bravery and wisdom of our human friends. Without them, Teguk might have fallen." The hall was filled with Varrocks who had once laughed at the humans. Now they watched in silence. Then, to everyone's shock, Warrior General Nera stepped forward and knelt before Hana and Juwu. The towering blue warrior, who had once mocked them for their size, bowed her head low. "I judged you by your height, not your hearts," Nera said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "I was wrong. The Varrock Imperium owes its survival to Earth. I beg your pardon for my arrogance." Hana stepped forward and placed her small hand on Nera's massive shoulder. "Stand up, Warrior General," she said kindly. "Friends don't kneel to friends." Nera rose slowly, her 3 eyes blinking with emotion. "From this day forward," announced the High Elder, humans and Varrocks will be allies. Size means nothing. Courage, wisdom, and compassion are what truly matter.